The moment my sister looked me in the eyes, in front of 200 guests, in her white dress, on the happiest day of her life, and said, "You're embarrassing me. You need to leave." I was sitting in a wheelchair. I hadn't done anything wrong. I hadn't caused a scene. I hadn't spilled anything, said anything, done anything. I was just there. Her disabled little sister, in a wheelchair, and apparently that was enough. She handed a bridesmaid a trash bag. Yes, an actual black trash bag, and told her to collect my things and escort me out. And here's what nobody tells you about moments like that. You don't cry right away. You go completely still. Like your brain just shuts the whole thing down because it cannot process what just happened. But what happened after that moment? That's the part that changed everything. Stay with me, because this story doesn't end in that parking lot. My name is Savannah Calloway, and I want you to understand something before I tell you the rest of this story. I am not a bitter person. I never have been. I grew up in a small town in rural Ohio, the second of 3 daughters. My oldest sister is named Brooke. Brooke, who was, by everyone's account, the golden child. The one who got straight A's, the one who led the cheerleading squad, the one who could walk into a room and make every single person turn their head. And then there was me. I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis at 19 years old. That's the kind of diagnosis that splits your life in half. There's everything before it, and everything after. In my early 20s, I could still walk with a cane on good days. But by 26, I was in a wheelchair full-time. And my little sister Jolene, sweet, funny, wildly loyal Jolene, she never once made me feel like a burden. She'd push my wheelchair through the grocery store doing terrible British accents just to make me laugh. She was my person. Brooke was different. She tolerated me the way you tolerate a cracked window in winter. She'd never say anything outright cruel. Not in front of people anyway. But there were always these little moments. The eye roll when I needed extra time getting into a restaurant. The sigh when family events had to account for accessibility. The way she'd say, "Oh, Savannah," in this voice that made me feel like a problem to be managed rather than a person to be loved. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself she was just stressed, just busy, just Brooke. I should have listened to what those little moments were actually telling me. Brooke met her fiancé, a guy named Colton, at a rooftop networking event in Chicago 3 years ago. Colton is exactly who you'd expect Brooke to end up with. Polished, successful, good-looking in that generic catalog way. He wore blazers to casual dinners and talked about his investment portfolio before you'd even asked his name. I actually tried to like Colton. I genuinely did. When Brooke got engaged, the whole family went into wedding planning overdrive. Mom was crying happy tears. Dad was writing checks. Jolene was already planning her maid of honor speech. And me? I was just so happy for my sister. I know that sounds hard to believe given everything I'm about to tell you. But at that point, I was. I wanted a fresh start with Brooke. I thought maybe a wedding, a new chapter in her life, would soften something in her. She asked me to be a bridesmaid. That surprised me. But I said yes without hesitation. What followed were 8 months of the most exhausting, quietly cruel experience of my adult life. The bridesmaid dress fittings were held at a boutique with 3 steps leading up to the entrance and no ramp. When I pointed this out, Brooke said, and I quote, "Can't you just have someone carry you up? It's not that big of a deal." The bachelorette party was planned at a venue that was, quote, "too small to accommodate a wheelchair." So Jolene stayed back with me while the rest of the girls went. Every time I raised a concern about accessibility at the wedding venue, Brooke would get this look on her face, this tight, controlled look, and say something like, "I'm really trying, Savannah, but this is my wedding, not an accessibility audit." I started to feel it then, that familiar shrinking, that sense that I was asking for too much just by existing. But I kept showing up, because that's what you do for family, or at least, that's what I thought. The wedding was held at a vineyard outside of Columbus on a Saturday in late September. The kind of day that looks like it was designed by someone who really understood autumn. Golden light, leaves just turning, air that smelled like wood smoke and something sweet. I had spent 2 months finding the perfect dress. Champagne-colored, off the shoulder, with a full skirt that draped beautifully even while seated. Jolene helped me with my hair, soft curls pinned back with tiny pearl clips. I felt genuinely, unexpectedly beautiful that morning. We arrived early. The venue had told Brooke, and Brooke had confirmed with me, that there was a side entrance with a ramp for wheelchair access. There was. It led directly past the catering setup and the staff bathrooms. Not exactly the grand entrance the other bridesmaids got, but I didn't say a word. I just wheeled through and focused on the day. The ceremony was held on a lawn. The ground was slightly uneven. I noticed but managed. My cousin Travis walked beside me and helped navigate the rough patches. Guests smiled at me. Some people I hadn't seen in years came over to say hello. It felt okay. It felt like maybe I'd been too worried. During the cocktail hour, I was seated at a table near the edge of the room. I later realized it was specifically because my wheelchair was easier to tuck away near the wall where guests wouldn't have to navigate around me. But again, I didn't say anything. I told myself it was practical. And then the reception started. The wedding planner, a sharp, efficient woman named Diana, came over to me privately during dinner and said something that made my stomach drop. "Savannah," she said quietly, leaning down. "Brooke has asked that during the first dance photos and the formal family portraits, you wait in the side room. She's concerned about the visual balance of the group shots." I stared at her. "I'm sorry?" Diana looked deeply uncomfortable. She said, and these are her words, not mine, that the wheelchair is visually distracting in photographs. I felt the table go very far away from me, like I was looking at the room through the wrong end of a telescope. "She said that," I repeated. Diana nodded. She had the grace to look ashamed. I told Diana I needed a moment. She walked away. I sat there, alone at my table with my champagne glass and the ruins of what I'd thought this day was going to be. Jolene found me about 4 minutes later. I could tell by her face that she already knew. Her eyes were red. "Savannah, Don't," I said, not angry, just tired. "Let's just get through today. I want to be clear. I followed every instruction. I stayed out of the formal portraits. I waited in the side room, which was a coat closet, essentially, while my family stood in the golden September light and smiled for the photographer. I sat in the dark, and I listened to the music through the wall and I held it together. But when I wheeled back into the reception, something had shifted in Brooke. Maybe it was the champagne. Maybe it was years of barely contained resentment, finally having nowhere left to go. Maybe she'd planned this all along and was just waiting for the right moment. I had wheeled up to a group of relatives, aunts and cousins I genuinely adore, and we were laughing about something, some old family story, and I felt, for the first time all day, like I belonged somewhere. And then Brooke appeared. She didn't come over to join the conversation. She stood a few feet away, and she had this expression on her face, tight, white around the mouth, eyes sharp. And she said loudly enough for the people around us to hear, "Savannah, can I talk to you for a second?" I excused myself and wheeled toward her. She walked me, or rather, walked alongside me as I wheeled, to a quieter corner near the bar. And then she turned to face me and her voice was low and controlled and absolutely ice cold. "I need you to leave," she said. I genuinely thought I'd misheard her. "What?" "I need you to leave the reception. You're making people uncomfortable. Every time someone looks at you, they get sad, and I don't want sad energy at my wedding. I've tried to be patient about this, Savannah, but you're a lot. And today isn't about you." I couldn't speak. I actually could not form words. "I'll have someone call you a car," she continued, already turning away. "This isn't personal." "Not personal," I finally managed to say. "Brooke, I'm your sister." "And I love you," she said with this horrible plastic smile. "But you're ruining the aesthetic." "The aesthetic." She actually said that. "I am not a person who makes scenes." I have spent my entire adult life learning to be graceful in moments that don't deserve grace. But something happened in me at that moment. Something cracked open, and my voice, when it came out, was shaking. You're asking me to leave your wedding because I'm in a wheelchair. I'm asking you to leave because... Say it, Brooke. Say the real reason. She didn't, but the look on her face said it anyway. That's when Colton's mother, a dignified woman named Vivian, who had been quietly walking past with a glass of wine, stopped walking. She had heard everything. Now here's where the story takes a turn that I did not see coming, and neither did Brooke. Vivian Whitfield, Colton's mother, is not a woman who makes small gestures. She is the kind of woman who built a real estate company from the ground up, raised 3 children as a single mother after her husband walked out, and once reportedly told a Fortune 500 CEO that his PowerPoint was embarrassing. She does not do anything halfway. Vivian set her wine glass down on a nearby table. She straightened her evening jacket, and she walked directly over to Brooke. I need to speak with you privately, Vivian said. Not a request. I watched Brooke's face shift, that careful social performance of hers kicking in immediately. Of course, Vivian. I just need to... Now, please. They disappeared into a side room for about 11 minutes. Jolene found me and took my hands, and we just sat together and waited. The music kept playing. People kept dancing. Nobody around us seemed to know what was happening. When Brooke came back out, her face was different. Something had gone out of it. Vivian walked back to where I was sitting, crouched down to my eye level. This elegant woman in a beaded navy gown, crouching on the floor of her son's wedding reception. And she took both my hands in hers. I owe you an apology on behalf of this evening, she said. Not on behalf of myself. I want you here, and I think you are absolutely lovely. But I owe you an apology that you were made to feel otherwise. I just stared at her. I want to tell you something, Vivian continued. Colton doesn't know the things that were said to you tonight, but I'm going to make sure that changes. And I'm also going to make sure of something else. What Vivian had apparently told Brooke in that side room was this. Colton's family money, the money that was funding not just the wedding, but the down payment on the house Brooke and Colton were buying, the honeymoon in Tuscany, the entire first chapter of their married life, came with certain expectations. Expectations about family, about character, about who Colton had chosen to align himself with. And Vivian, who had seen enough of life to know what cruelty dressed as preference looks like, told Brooke plainly, if Savannah is not welcomed back to this reception with a real apology from you in front of the people who witnessed what happened, I will be having a very different conversation with Colton tonight, and it will not be about centerpieces. Brooke came back to me, and she apologized, in front of the table of relatives who had watched the whole thing. Her voice was tight, and her eyes were dry, and it was not the apology of someone who had genuinely changed. I want to be honest about that. It was the apology of someone who understood consequences. But then something happened that I hadn't expected. Something real. Jolene stood up. My little sister, 23 years old in her bridesmaid dress, stood up at that table and she said, in this clear, steady voice, I think we all need to acknowledge what happened tonight. And I need Savannah to know, in front of everyone, that she is the bravest, strongest, most beautiful person at this wedding. And whoever made her feel otherwise got it catastrophically wrong. There was a moment of absolute silence, and then Colton's aunt started clapping, and then the cousins, and then half the table. Brooke sat back down and did not look at anyone for a very long time. In the weeks after the wedding, things unraveled for Brooke in ways she hadn't anticipated. Vivian, true to her word, had spoken to Colton. Not to break up the marriage. They were already married, and Vivian is not a woman who believes in burning things to the ground, but to have an honest conversation about what she'd witnessed, about character, about what it means to stand by the people in your life who need standing by. Colton, to his credit, was horrified. He had not known. He came to see me personally, 2 weeks after the wedding, and the conversation we had was genuine in a way that Brooke's apology hadn't been. He wasn't performing. He was just mortified and sad and trying to figure out who he'd married. Their first year of marriage, from what Jolene tells me, is rocky in ways that have nothing to do with normal newlywed adjustment. My mother, who had not been at the corner of the room when Brooke said what she said, found out through my aunt. That conversation between my mother and Brooke is one I was not present for. But my mother called me afterward and cried for 40 minutes on the phone. Not performed crying. Grief. The grief of realizing that one of your children is capable of something you hadn't believed they were capable of. My mother now shows up to every single one of my doctor's appointments. She drives 90 minutes each way. She has not missed one since September. As for me, I started a blog in October. Nothing fancy, just writing. Stories about living with MS, about navigating a world that wasn't built with you in mind, about family and love, and what it means to keep choosing both even when they hurt you. By January, I had 60,000 readers. A producer from a podcast network reached out in February. We're recording this month, and Jolene, my Jolene, is moving to my city in the spring. She accepted a job transfer she'd been sitting on for a year, and when I asked her what finally made her decide, she said, "I realized life is too short to not live near my favorite person." I've thought a lot about what I want this story to mean. I don't want it to be a story about hating my sister. I genuinely, truly hope that Brooke is doing some real looking inward right now. I hope the discomfort of that evening stays with her long enough to do something useful, to change something fundamental in how she sees the people around her, who need a little more grace. I'm not there yet with forgiveness. I want to be honest about that too. You don't get handed a trash bag at your sister's wedding and come home fine. But here's what I know. I showed up that day. I wore the champagne dress and the pearl clips, and I wheeled through the staff entrance without complaining, and I waited in the coat closet during the photos. And then I held my head up when it mattered. And the thing that saved that night, the thing that made it something other than just a wound I'd carry forever, wasn't revenge. It wasn't watching Brooke squirm. It was Vivian crouching down to my eye level in a beaded navy gown. It was Jolene standing up. It was the reminder that in any room, even the rooms that weren't built for you, even the rooms where someone actively wanted you gone, there are people who will see you, who will fight for you, who will clap. I just had to stay long enough to find them. And that, right there, is why I believe that the truth always finds its way to the surface, no matter how hard someone tries to bury it. If this story moved you, if it made you feel seen, or if it reminded you of someone you love, please share it. Because stories like Savannah's deserve to be heard. And if you're new here, welcome to Velyra Payback. This is the place where real stories get told. Stories about justice, about dignity, about the people who got pushed down and somehow found the strength to rise anyway. We drop new stories every single day, so if you don't want to miss what's coming next, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on your notifications. Because tomorrow's story, trust me, you are not going to want to miss it. I'll see you then.